Well, a genius, a Boy Scout, and a pastor were flying together on a small plane when the pilot came back to the cabin and said, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but this plane is going down and there are only 3 parachutes for the 4 of us." He went on to say, "I'm going to take one of the parachutes because I have a wife and 3 kids." So he grabbed a parachute and jumped. The genius said, "Well, I have to have a parachute because I am the smartest man in the world." So he took one and he jumped. Uh-oh. There. Couldn't make my screen scroll. I thought you might have to wonder what happened. The pastor turned to the Boy Scout and said, "Oh, I have lived a good life, and the Lord has been good to me. So you take the remaining chute and I'll go down with the plane." The Boy Scout said, "Hey, relax, Pastor. The smartest man in the world just took my backpack and jumped." It's been said that pride is the only disease known to humankind that makes everyone sick, except the one who has it. Jesus told the parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector, or we might call him an IRS agent. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying, "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves and rogues and adulterers, or even like this tax collector." He went on to tell all the things he did that made him better. "Why, I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of my income." But now the tax collector, standing far off, would not even look up to heaven, but was beating his breast, saying, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." This is a beautifully crafted parable whose meaning leaps off the pages for us. Yet, when Jesus teaches with parable, there was always some hidden depth to be unveiled and unveiled. As we saw in that video clip, Jesus was addressing this to people who felt self-righteous and regarded others with contempt. In other words, Jesus was speaking to people like us. Average people. People who tend to see themselves as better than average. Well, I'm not as bad as they are. Studies show that 9 in 10 managers rate themselves as superior to their average colleagues, as do 9 out of 10 college professors. We all think we're better than that other one. The one thing that unites us as human beings, says Dave Barry, humorist, he says, regardless of age or gender or religion or economic status, we all have that deep down belief that we are above average drivers. You ask anybody, they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, I'm really a good driver." Now, some of those other people, but I'm really a good driver. As we hear the 2 men who go to the temple to pray, the natural assumption made by anyone hearing this story is that the Pharisee is the devout person, the good driver. For the Pharisees were the ones who strictly observed the religious laws of their day. The tax collector, on the other hand, was a shady person, often thought to be taking more taxes than was required, not unlike our belief about the IRS. He was considered the bad driver, the sinner. Whenever we look at a parable, it can be helpful to use our imagination to put ourselves in the story and become one of the characters. So I ask you to do that. Which character are you? How comfortable or uncomfortable do you feel being that character? How does it feel to be in their clothes? Do you find yourself saying, God, I thank you that I am not like other people? Or are you saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner? You know, I have to say, as I listen to the political ads that have been flooding our televisions, touting the superiority of one candidate over the other, I can't help but think that they are basically saying, God, thank you that I am not like this other candidate. Oh, I'm not just talking about the candidates for president, but all those ads that run over and over and over. Sometimes you see them 4 and 5 times during one television program. Whatever happened to talking about issues without elevating yourself or bashing your opponent, and thus allowing the voter to truly decide who is better without being told who is better? What a loss for us voters that we have lost the ability to truly discuss what is important. Oh, I know. When I'm pointing my finger at those candidates, guess what? I'm acting like that Pharisee too. Thank God I don't do things like that. Can I ever really get rid of that Pharisee that hides inside of me? I find it so easy to feel superior to others in one way or another, while being blind to my own shortcomings. Only by making my own that humble prayer of the tax collector can I be protected from the danger of this self-righteous thinking. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus encountered 2 kinds of people in his ministry: those who are trusting in God and those who are trusting in themselves. You know, things haven't really changed. Those are still the same kind of people we encounter today. Those who are trusting in God and those who are trusting in themselves. We need to ask ourselves, who am I trusting in today? The Pharisee thought he was right with God. You know, there was really nothing extraordinary about a Pharisee going to the temple to pray. He had been there hundreds, if not thousands of times before. Even his prayer was ordinary by strict Pharisaic standards of his day. God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves and rogues, or even this tax collector. It would appear that he was so concerned with others that he didn't have time to really think about God. You know, that's the worst thing about pride. It separates us from God. It builds this wall, this division, this thing that pushes God away. Oh, it's not God who moved, but it's us who have built this wall. The Pharisee's prayer was full of his own self-righteousness. It sounded like he was more interested in himself than in God. And then in comparison, we have that lowly tax collector who was so despised in Jesus' day that they wouldn't even speak of they would speak of tax collectors and sinners as if it was a category together. The tax collector's prayer was altogether different from the Pharisees. The Pharisee stood and prayed before the Lord, proud as a peacock. Look at me. The tax collector stooped in humility, beating his breast and daring not even to look up to heaven. It was the posture of a penitent person. The tax collector's prayer was unpretentious and one that connected him to God. God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You know, those were 7 words that changed that man's life. Those 7 words revealed a heart that was empty, yet ready to be filled with God. One went to the temple to praise himself, and the other to praise God. One to ask for nothing, the other to ask for everything. In a surprising twist, Jesus concluded the parable by saying, I tell you, this tax collector went down to his home justified rather than the other. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but all who humble themselves will be exalted. The despised tax collector restored his relationship with God by asking for forgiveness, while the Pharisee, being clueless, moved farther away from God. This isn't the ending that the original hearers of this parable would have expected. You know, they'd been taught that good behavior draws you closer to God, while bad behavior drives you away. They knew that Pharisees were good and tax collectors were bad. But, as usual, Jesus turned things upside down. He debunked that thinking. He insisted that unless we are aware of our secret faults and humble enough to know that we need forgiveness, we're going to discover that our minor mistakes can become major walls to our relationship with God. Unfortunately, I have to confess that I know I too often act like the Pharisee. Even if I don't say it out loud, I might be thinking, thank God I don't. What about you? Do you have those thoughts too? My eyes are too often judging eyes rather than loving eyes. Oh God, open my eyes to see my own shortcomings and then confess them to you, knowing that you are a gracious and loving God who will forgive my sins and then offer me life abundant. God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Perhaps you've heard the story of the man who came to the gates of heaven, and he was greeted by St. Peter, and Peter says to the man, now, could you give me a brief history of your life with emphasis on good deeds? He said, then, we can see if you can gain entrance to the kingdom of heaven. You see, you'll need 1,000 points to be admitted. That's a cinch, said the man. He said, let's see, I've been active in the church since the days of my childhood. I went to Sunday school. I was a leader in the youth group. I went on mission trips. I served on the church council. I served on every committee. I raised money for the addition to the building. His list was extensive. Oh, very, very impressive, Peter said. An angel tallied the points, and he whispered in Peter's ear, and Peter said, yes, quite impressive. We seldom see people with all your good works. You will be pleased to know you have 327 points. Is there anything else you can think of? The man broke out into a cold sweat, and he began to list every single act of kindness he could think of. Quite exceptional, quite exceptional. You now have 402 points. Anything else? Well, let me see. I helped a lady across the street 22 years ago. Great. That's 431 points, says St. Peter. The man cries out, I'm sunk. There's no hope for me. What more could I have done? Oh, Lord, all I can do is beg for mercy. That, exclaims Peter, is 1,000 points. Come on in.